Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Rainey. I am Charlene Rainey's husband. God put it on my heart today, and I would like to begin my series of Andrew's Apologetics, tackling some of the hard questions that people may have, and perhaps blessing your life with some illumination to the answers of those questions. Now, this series will begin with a question which I believe is important, even though it is largely ignored by a lot of different people. That would be, how can finite man know an infinite God? Now, I know that the chicken scratch on there isn't exactly the best, but work with me, people, okay? Now, before we begin, I'm going to define one term, that is the term know. Know right here is the most important term here to understand going into this. And this dry erase marker is running out of ink. Can you get me that other one, darling? Now, what we mean by know, when we say how can we know an infinite God, what we mean is not just that we know an infinite God exists, but how can a man have a relation with an infinite God? That's the kind of knowing that we're talking about here. That is so much better, thank you. And so, now that we understand that, let's dive into a few things we have to understand. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few different premises and a few different arguments so that we understand the answer to this question. Then I'm going to draw how an infinite God and a finite man might be able to know each other, how that might look. So let's begin. Part one of this will start with number one. We must understand God is infinite. Okay, so God is infinite. He is an infinite being. What does that mean? Basically, an infinite being is a being that is not confined just to creation. That is what an infinite being is. Creation is finite. The universe only goes so many light years out. Things that exist in a material world only exist within the dimensions of space and time. The dimensions of space, length, width, height, and time being what affects the objects within three-dimensional space. God exists outside of all that, ergo, God is infinite. There is no containing his existence. Man, on the other hand, is not an infinite being. And so, we understand that God is infinite. Number two, human beings are not. We also must talk about number three. The third premise that we have to assume is that God has the ability and desire to be known. So God has ability and desire to be known. You say, well, Andrew, how can we know that God actually both desires and has the ability to be known? Very simple. Starting with desire, God has the desire to be known. We know this for two reasons. Number one, because God has given humans the capacity to ask the question. If God created the material universe and created us within it, then God intentionally designed human beings with the ability to ask the question, does a God exist? Why would God assuming God exists, why would God give people the ability to ask that question if he did not intend to provide a definite answer, if he did not intend for us to know him. So the very fact that we have the capacity to ask the question means that God wants to be known. We also know that God has the desire to be known, to have relation, because human beings throughout all of human civilization, all recorded civilization, has been religious. There has not been a single human society in ancient times that was considered fully atheist. Every human being has an innate draw toward religion, an innate draw to a higher purpose. Human beings that believe that they have no higher purpose, have no higher calling, are subject to depression, suicidal thoughts, and a host of other maladies, mental maladies. And so whenever somebody convinces themselves that life is pointless, that there is nothing greater than humanity, they become both depressed and suicidal. So that is a show that human beings have the sense of the divine, have a draw toward God, which was intentionally designed within us. Again, why would God create human beings with the capacity and the desire for God, the capacity to ask the question and the desire to know the answer, if God did not want to be known? So that shows us he has the desire, the D right here. Now, how do we know God has the ability to be known? Well, if God created the universe and God is all powerful, then God can do anything which raw power can do. So why would God, who created a universe and created human beings with the capacity and the desire to know God, then not create a way or not have the ability to create a way for himself to be known? That would be like if a mother and a father had a baby within our material realm, and they also were unable to be known to the baby. The creation has to be able to know the creator. Otherwise, the creation has no way of logically existing, that has no way of understanding their existence. And again, God has the ability to create, so he has the ability to reveal himself. Just like how a father has the ability with a mother to create a baby and then later on to get to know the baby, to reveal himself through a relationship. And so by nature and ability, God is able to make himself known. That's how we know God has the ability and the desire to be known, to have relation. Now, premise number 4. Humanity cannot understand infinity. Humanity cannot understand infinity. So this is pretty simple. Human beings are finite beings. We only have a limited capacity to picture something. Try to picture an infinite space, or try to picture an infinite color. Reality is, none of us are capable of picturing an infinite color. We will have some frame of reference. We will picture some kind of a confined color, a confined space, simply because our minds are finite. We have a limited capacity to understand things. We have a limited capacity to perceive things. We can only imagine what we can perceive, and we can only see so much at one time. Therefore, we cannot understand infinity. So, if humanity cannot understand God, God has the ability and the desire to be known. Therefore, it is God. Therefore, God has to make himself known. We don't have the ability to know God with our own effort. We cannot reach up to the divine and know or have a relation or understand God. because we cannot comprehend him in all of his fullness. So God has to reach down and reveal himself to us. This answers a common objection of atheists that life itself is a mystery. God is a greater mystery than life. If I'm unable to even understand the smaller mystery of life, why would I first need to understand the greater mystery of God in order to understand the smaller mystery of life? The reason that argument against God's existence doesn't work is because it assumes that we have to try to understand God, and that God does not attempt to reveal himself to us and make himself understandable to us. But God does try to do that, and the reason he does that is so that we can have a relationship with him. And so that's part one. Those are the first set of things that we have to understand. Now, getting a little more to the point here. So, part number two, how are we able to know anyone or anything, be it a creature or a person, be it a dog or your father? Number one, the only way to know someone is by interaction. So, K equals I. The only way to know is to interact. Someone may object and say we can know someone through reputation. Well, in one sense, that's true, but in the sense we're talking about, it's not. We can know someone's reputation, as in we can have an idea of who this person might be, but we can't know or have relationship with an actual person based on reputation alone. We have to have actual interaction. The best that we can know someone by their reputation is the public perception of a person's character. But we can't actually know their character unless we interact in some way with them. That's why we speak to each other to get to know each other. That's why we spend time with our dogs. We are interacting with them in order to truly know them. The only other way that you might be able to know something would be through observation, but as we'll talk about here in a moment, God exists outside of space and time. He's unable to be observed by our five senses. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so we'll come back to that idea later. But suffice it to say, God cannot be observed by our five senses. God himself can only be known through interaction, which is the only way for us to really know anybody. Now, number two, God wants to be known. He wants to be known. So, we talked about his desire to be known, and some would object to this, and they would say, well, if God really wants to be known so bad, why doesn't he just appear? Because God doesn't just want to be known, as in a part of him be known to us, but God wants us to know him in all of his fullness. You see, if God did appear to us, for one, we still would not really be able to know all of God, because God is an infinite being, which means not only is his presence infinite, his mind is infinite, his power is infinite, and all of his attributes, his love, his compassion, his wrath, his anger, all of these things are infinite. So a finite mind cannot perceive, therefore cannot interact with or relate to a truly infinite being. If he appeared at all to us in our current state, he would appear only in part, and we would only perceive part of God. God doesn't want to be known just in part. He wants to be known in his entirety. And so, this is one thing about God wanting to be known. That's how an infinite God could therefore want to be known. So, if the only way to know anyone is through interaction, and God wants to be known, he has the ability and the desire to be known, then it logically follows 3. God interacts with creation or with us. Because that is the only way for anybody to know anybody. God already knows us in the sense that he created us and he knows everything about us, but he wants to know us in a deeper way, having an actual relationship with us. Again, knowing God is not just knowing all of his attributes or knowing the depth of all of his attributes. Knowing God is having relationship with him. That's something that is impossible to do by yourself. You can't have a relationship with somebody yet never have a relationship with somebody at the same time. You have to have a relationship with someone to have a relationship with someone. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but these are the kind of things we have to establish before I start showing what it might look like for an infinite God to relate to or to know a finite man. Now, so we've established there that basically God interacts with us. Why? Because he wants to know us. He wants to have relationship with us. And now we have to understand the method of his interaction and things that are surrounding his interaction. So, as I mentioned before, God is a being which exists outside the material world, outside of space and outside of time. So, 1, God exists out of space-time, out of ST. How do we know that God exists outside of space-time? For 2 reasons. For 1, because he cannot be observed by the 5 human senses. The senses are sight, smell, taste, touch, and hearing. All of these things serve to observe different things within our material world, be it this eraser, or this dry erase marker, excuse me, I can smell it, I can see it, I can taste it, I won't taste it, I can taste it, and I can feel it. And this is how I'm able to interact with this marker. God, there is nothing of God in his spirit, in his fullness, that can be directly interacted with by our 5 human senses. So we know he must exist outside of space and time. We also know that God must exist out of space and time more convincingly because God created space and time. And anything that is created by something outside of the creation and greater than the creation. Whenever a man and wife come together and they do their business to create a child, that child is created by a mother which existed before the child, and by a father which existed before the child. The child grows in the mother's womb. The mother doesn't grow in the child's womb. Whenever buildings are constructed, they are constructed by construction workers. They are not constructed innately. In other words, this building that I'm in right here did not first exist and then had construction workers build it. It first did not exist, and then something greater and more intelligent than it came from the outside world to create this building. And so, since God created space and time, he must exist, he has to exist outside of space and time, be greater than space and time, and therefore cannot be perceived by someone who exists within space and time. Okay, so that brings us to our second premise. Humanity can only understand things within space-time. How do we know that? Because we are incapable of examining things outside of space-time. Okay, that may sound like circular reasoning, but it's really not. What it is human beings, all of our senses are geared toward the material world. Even things like radio waves and microwaves, they don't really become a reality to us until we can see them or in some way experience them through our five senses. How do we know that microwaves even exist? Very simple. Because we have created machines that both produce them and that are able to detect them. How do we know radiation exists? Because we have machines that allow us to hear them or to perceive them. We also know radiation exists because when we walk into a radiated area, we start getting something called radiation burns. And so that is how we are able to perceive everything around us. Anything that is outside of our perception is outside of space-time. We are three-dimensional creations. We have length, width, and height, and we exist within time. Otherwise, we could perceive all of time happening all at the same time, all at the same moment. Then time, truthfully, would be practically meaningless to us. So we can only understand what is now before us. Another way of looking at it is this. Perhaps this is simpler. I cannot see who will be in this building tomorrow. I also cannot see what is beyond the wall behind my wife. I can't see that because I am confined within space and time. There are limits to what I can perceive. And that's what I mean by existing within space-time. God exists outside of space-time for reasons already discussed, so he doesn't have those same limits placed upon him. But because he exists outside, he has to be able to interact with those inside if he's going to be known at all. In other words, God cannot take us outside of space-time because we are creatures created within space-time. We cannot perceive anything outside of space-time. So, premise number 3, God makes himself known through the material world. Through space-time. Or in space-time, however you want to look at it. So, now that we've covered those 3 premises, hopefully it'll make a little more sense once I actually draw this diagram. So, take a look at the whiteboard. Let's say this whiteboard represents all of space and all of time. Let's say that I make a division here, and we will call these 4 zones, which I have divided, different moments in time that we are able to see all at once. We can see all 4 zones, all 4 times, and we can see all of the space on this whiteboard at once. And this is how God perceives all of us who are within space-time. This is how God perceives creation. He sees all of space at the same time. He sees all of time at the same time because he's looking at it from an outsider's perspective. Okay, let's say that I make a drawing of a person. We'll start with a little person. We'll say this is the child or the baby. We will draw the same person, but a little bit older. We'll say that this is baby man, teenage man, teen man. We got baby man here. We got teen man. We got adult man. Adult man here, he's bigger, he's got a bigger body and all that. He perhaps works a job or something like that. And then we have old man. You know, he's old, he's all hunched over, he's got that hunch, he maybe has some kind of a cane. I know my stick figures are absolutely beautiful. Don't any one of you judge me. But anyway, so we're looking, and we'll just say that each of these stick figures is the same person at different moments in time, and of course in different places. So how are we as three-dimensional characters going to interact with these two-dimensional characters? Let's understand a few things. First off, each one of these guys can only perceive in four directions. They can only perceive up, down, left, and right. Every single one of them has this limited perception. They cannot see every single angle. They don't see all of space or all of time at the same time. They are limited. Whereas we, relative to them, are not limited. We don't share the same limitations. This does pose a bit of a problem, though. They only perceive in these four directions, and they cannot see or perceive anything outside of their little box. We can see them all at the same time. We know them whenever they're a baby, a teen, an adult, and an old man, but they can only know us at one particular moment in time, right? You say, well, why can't they just turn and look at you? Because they don't have the ability. They don't have the height. They only have the length and the length and the width to perceive by. They only have this particular category in time. So if I was going to have a relationship with any of these guys right here, how could I do that? Well, the first thing, I would want them to know that I am here for them and that I care for them. And so I would create them an environment. Say, baby man here, let's give him some parents. Okay, he's got some parents. Maybe that way he'll know I care about him. Maybe I can impart some wisdom into his parents' mind, you know. Maybe I can speak a little bit. This is my depiction of imparting wisdom into the parent's mind here. Perhaps I can have a little house built for him. Yes, I know, my house is beautiful. Don't you judge me again. This is the best house you've ever seen in your life. I'm telling you, it's got an indoor pool. It's got gardens that are greater than anything you've ever seen. Just trust me, because I'm not going to draw all that, because it would take way too long. And so, through creation and through impartation of wisdom, by giving the parents wisdom and understanding that baby man here can't have yet because he's a baby, perhaps I'm able to have a relationship with him. And for him, he's going through all of his life up to this point. He is living right here in this moment. But me, I can jump around. I can interact with baby man. I can set angels over baby man. I can draw whatever I need to. We'll set angels over baby man that only I can see and that love and protect him. And perhaps I can draw some grass, some outside world and all that, some different things to make sure that baby man is able to grow up into teen, adult, and old man. And at the same time, while I'm thinking about and providing for baby man, I'm able also to interact with teen man. Maybe teen man, after he's grown up with parents who know about me, who have wisdom and experience that I've given them right here. Maybe teen man grows up and he's like, well, you know what, mom and dad, they're great, and I'm grateful for the different things that they've taught me. You know, I feel a protecting presence around me that can't really be understood or perceived, but I just feel that there's something around me protecting me, and that's great. But how do I really know that God is interacting with me? How do I really know that this stuff is God? So, used to, I would just talk to the parents. Now I begin to put little thought bubbles here within baby man's head. That is a thought bubble. It is not a tumor, okay? It is a thought bubble. And I begin to speak to him in a still, small voice. And I see him hearing the still, small voice while I'm watching him also as a baby. I can do both at the same time because I'm not working with the same limitation. So I see that his mom and dad have raised him up to teen man. He's been raised up in a godly home, in a Christian home. Matter of fact, I can even put a little cross up here. Why not? And it's just been wonderful up to here. Now I'm starting to talk to him little here and little there in the still small voice. But the only way that he can really hear my voice, I mean, he can't hear me right now, as in outside of space and time, he can't hear me. He can't hear the words I'm saying to the camera right now because he's a two-dimensional being. That's why I have to impart different thoughts to him. I have to draw different things and influence his world, and that's how I have a relationship with him. Okay, so he hears the still small voice, and he starts to believe on his own that perhaps there is a God. Let's say teen man, he believes, but being a teenager, he's doing stupid stuff here and there. Let's say he picks himself up a joint or a cigarette of some kind, and he's over here smoking. He's doing all that stuff that teenagers do, just stupid stuff kids do. It is what it is. And he starts feeling a lot of guilt as a result of it. Guilt enters into his life. He starts feeling like he's worthless. He starts feeling like perhaps God has abandoned him because of all the guilt of sin that has entered into his life. And I'm looking at this and I'm still speaking to him. I haven't erased the still small voice. I'm still speaking to him. I'm still influencing his surroundings because he decided to try hanging out with these different guys, these perhaps some hoodlums, they've got the sagging britches or whatever, they got different things. Again, my art is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen in your life. Don't you judge? But I'm influencing him. I'm telling him to go away from those people, and he's not wanting to listen right now. He's still living with his guilt. But that doesn't change the fact that I'm still interacting with him. That says go away. That doesn't change the fact that I'm still interacting with him. I'm still working on revealing myself to him so that he understands there's certain things that I like. There's certain things I created for him to do that he isn't doing. I keep on interacting with him. He feels guilt. He feels worthless, maybe depressed. And I just say to him and keep talking to him in the still small voice, hey man, I see you already as an adult. I already know what you can become and what you will become in the future. So I bring in forgiveness, mercy, and grace to help him to change. He starts turning his life around because he finally gets tired of all of his guilt and all of his worthlessness and his depression. So I keep interacting with him. He starts turning his life around, and he turns into what I called him to be as adult man. We'll say he's, a preacher of some kind. We'll give him a little tie. Again, this is the most beautiful tie you have ever seen in your life. Don't judge. He's a preacher man now. He feels my power. He feels power, power and presence all around him. He starts perceiving that I'm really with him. he needs something, he prays, and I perform a miracle. And I just keep on interacting with him as he continues to live. And so life goes on. Adult man is preaching the word. He's helping people, talking to people, telling them about me so that I can have a relationship with them, the same kind that I have with baby man, teen man, adult man, and old man all at the same time. I want to have that same kind of relationship with everybody in two-dimensional space. So he does that. He goes throughout his rest of his life, and now he is at the end of his life as old man. Now, old man here, he just knows that his time is coming up. Let's say he's, I don't know, he's just at peace. He's got a little halo above his head, we'll say, that he cannot perceive, but he has a little halo. He feels his crown of glory and his time is coming near. He feels comfort that I've brought into his life. He feels love. And as he slips away into death, he steps outside of this space. He knows that his time at this point is near, where he will be able to be with me forever. And then he, in this world, dies and then is translated into three-dimensional space, and he becomes like me. And then finally, after all this time only being able to know him within space and time, he's able to step through space and time outside of the material world and be able to have a true close relationship with me, just like my wife behind the camera is able to know me. He will now be able to know me. Now, for God, this is all happening all at the same time. He sees you as a baby. He sees you as a teen. He sees you at your highs. He sees you at your lows. He sees you at the very end of your life, all at once, with no limitation of his perspective. And the way that we know that God exists, the way we're able to know him, is through his interaction with us. And so, with all that said, if you were confused about how it is possible for a finite man to know an infinite God, I hope that this helps you understand more about God and about his nature, and perhaps answer some difficult questions. If you're an agnostic or an atheist and you've watched to the end of this video, please leave your comments below, any comments, objections, questions. This being an apologetics video, I fully believe that there are some that may see this and decide to criticize my viewpoint. Feel free to do that. That's how my viewpoint gets better. That's how I get better in articulating apologetics, and gives me topics for future videos. And if you have a hard question that you'd like for me to answer, then please leave it down below, and I will pray, and by the grace of God, we'll get an answer for you. So this has been Andrew's Apologetics. Thank you very much. God bless you.